Hello again, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we're learning how to guard our minds against all of the manipulations, attacks, and attempts at thought and behavior control that we come under today in the 21st century. In this week's video, we are going to continue examining the summit meeting that we began looking at in last week's video. This was a meeting organized by the Milken Institute in October of 2019. The panel of speakers were all there to discuss the development and distribution potential of a universal vaccine for all types of influenza virus. On the panel are Michael Spector, writer for the New Yorker magazine, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who at the time was the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Rick Bright, who at the time was the director of the government research agency known as BARDA, also Dr. Margaret Hamburg, who was the commissioner of the FDA during the Obama administration, and then we have Bruce Gallen and Casey Wright, who, at the time, were both involved in the private sector, working in vaccine technology development. Now, when we last looked at this event, we noted that while these people are quite well trained and have what seems to be solid knowledge and expertise in their respective fields, that does not mean that we should take everything they say as if it's either true or right. We always need to be asking questions of those who are in positions to shape and draft ideas regarding public policy, whether that be with respect to health, finance, socioeconomic issues, or any other major area of civilized society. Now, we need to do this because, as we learned in our early look at think tanks and propaganda, whenever there are large monetary interests backing individuals or groups who hold broad sweeping levels of power, influence, and control, there is likely one or many other unspoken agendas working alongside any stated goals of the groups in question. Now, these may be beneficial to humanity. However, historically speaking, it's often the case that there are corrupt, nefarious actors and aims operating at deeper levels of any influential organization. The fact that groups like the Milken Institute and the World Economic Forum or the Club of Rome are so large and well-funded makes it so that they have the perfect cover to operate at multiple levels of various narratives regarding the work and research that they put into the world. It's up to us to ask as many questions as we can and to put pressure on those who have the means to ensure that there is transparency at the highest levels of national or global policy creation. Unfortunately, this is a monumentally difficult task as the levels of corruption and power have insulated these groups from much, if any, of effective scrutiny and accountability. Be that as it may, the effort that we're making here is to learn how to deal with the world as it is, and only then will we be able to have the necessary data and skills to keep our minds on guard so that we may protect ourselves and our loved ones from the various psyops and control agendas that are being rolled out and ramped up to greater and greater intensities. Now, when we last looked at the particular discussion that is the focus of this video, we saw that there appears to be a sense among the panelists that the conventional system of vaccine development and the technologies which exist in that arena were in need of a hard reset. The moderator of the discussion, Spector, even says that he sees the need to, quote, blow up the current system so that a new one can take its place. This is where we will pick up and look at how these discussions aid in the development of widespread psychological operations. Now, there's a specific phrase that is spoken near the end of the discussion that I want to highlight as it reveals an underlying necessity for any psyop to be effective. If you have not yet checked out the discussion that we're looking at, I will link it in the description below so that you can have the context of what I'm talking about. I suggest you go and watch it and read the transcript as best you can. We left off last week with the setup from Spectre where he thinks that we should fundamentally change the way that we think about, develop, and administer vaccines in this country. His reasoning is that many people that he engages with simply don't, again in his opinion, understand the seriousness of the potential dangers of a communicable disease like influenza. Remember, this discussion happened in 2019, before the global outbreak of SARS-CoV-2, and up until that time, the conventional means of inoculating against flu viruses had proved relatively ineffective at preventing disease year in and year out due to the nature of the virus and its ability to mutate. In this discussion, Dr. Fauci explains that it's because of the fact that it's difficult to predict which version of the flu is going to be circulating every year that a universal vaccine has been ineffective, because each new version takes time to develop and produce. This is due to the method of creation where the vaccines are grown in labs out of organic material like chicken eggs. The discussion continued along these lines, and each panel member offered their own opinion on how to get better, more effective messaging out into the public regarding the need for everyone to get these shots every single year. They even discuss ways to make flu vaccines, quote, sexier, which I personally find gross and absurd. With respect to the kinds of questions we should be asking, this points to a prime example of a dual agenda at work, where the effort to aid humanity is really a convenient cover for profit motives, particularly to those on the panel with private interests that would benefit greatly from a new, mandated, universal vaccine program like the one being discussed. Whenever these think tanks and mouthpieces for massive financial and economic interests lead with their altruism and philanthropy, you can bet they are also counting on huge sums of money to be flowing their way in the near future. We need to be considering this at all times with any news narrative. Now back to the panel. The discussion goes on, and we hear Rick Bright discuss implementing the new technologies that are at our disposal to try and make vaccines that can be altered and shifted synthetically in the lab as quickly as they can morph in nature. He floats the idea of the new mRNA tech and how that would be a great way to achieve the goals of a new system for treating all diseases, not just influenza. The problem at the time was that getting the public on board with new health technologies wasn't as simple as it sounds, if it even does sound simple. As the panelists note, these kinds of things take time, often many years, even decades, to develop due to the need for efficacy testing and safety trials. That is, of course, if the old conventions are going to be adhered to. There may be a way to shift public perception that will make it so the people actually want to get this new technology rolled out as quickly as possible. This is where our key phrase is brought up. Dr. Fauci provides us with a description of how to shift public perception so that an entirely new system of vaccine tech can have a chance to move in and become the dominant methodology once adopted at a large enough scale. He states, "So it is a perception which is a misperception that it is not a serious disease. But as Casey said, hundreds of thousands of people die each year, and when you get a pandemic, millions and millions of people. So we really do have a problem with how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both." This phrase, disruptive and iterative, is one that we need to highlight and understand. This is how Psyops function, and when we run Dr. Fauci's words back through the events of the past 4 years, It should be pretty clear that this was the method of action when it came to the global public health response to COVID-19. Now let's quickly define the terms. Disruptive meaning a break or interruption in the normal course or continuation of some activity, process, or etc. And iterative meaning utilizing the repetition of a sequence of operations or procedures. So, we can understand this phrase to mean a repetitive operation that is designed to break or interrupt the normal course of activity. In the context of shifting global perception, this translates to a highly coordinated, repetitive campaign aimed at causing the kinds of emotional responses, such as fear, anger, and desperation, that would knock people out of their normal, day-to-day existence so that something new could be programmed into the thoughts and behaviors of as many people as possible. Now, does this sound familiar to anyone watching? Is this not exactly what we have been experiencing time and time again when it comes to not just COVID, but many other potentially dangerous viruses that, according to the unelected officials who we gave power and control to, could potentially spread around the globe, killing millions? This technique is ubiquitous when it comes to the ways that narratives are forced onto us and our minds are attacked every day. We have Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, China, the climate, racism. These and so many other narratives are fed to us one after the other through media organizations who specialize in this disruptive, iterative information delivery to the point that most people would rather shut their minds completely off to the chaos being forced down their throats and escape into some kind of mindless entertainment. The only problem there is the entertainment is owned by the same people who are involved in creating the news and the global control agendas. No matter where you go, these disruptions are on repeat everywhere in the modern world. We have to resist the urge to check out and avoid them, but rather take up the effort of identifying and speaking clearly about exactly what they are. Real events being leveraged by and for the sake of the powerful, furthering their efforts to maintain and gain more power. Ignoring these things plays into the hands of the controllers, because we will have stopped using our minds to think well about what they're forcing onto us. We can instead tell the truth and shed light on those who would attempt to alter reality toward their own evil aims. We need to call out the lies. We need to be able to read between the lines and hear what is not being said among the discussions and agendas that are dressed up to look so good and pure. There is much more work to be done, so let's keep developing our skills at seeking the truth and seeing things clearly. Until next time, stay safe, stay diligent, keeping your minds on guard.